Hello and welcome to our tutorial on translating your help center with Smartling's Zendesk Connector. Smartling offers two different integrations that allow you to translate content from Zendesk in an easy and automated way. Our Zendesk Connector enables you to localize your help center in Zendesk Guide, as well as dynamic content in Zendesk Support. The Zendesk Support Plugin, on the other hand, allows you to instantly translate support tickets from and into your customer's native language with Smartling's Machine Translation Hub. These two integrations are configured separately from each other. In this video, we will only take a closer look at the Zendesk Connector. To get more information on the Zendesk Support plugin, please visit our Help Center. Smartling's Zendesk Connector is a pre-built integration between your Zendesk knowledge base and the Smartling translation management system. It allows you to translate categories, sections, and articles in Zendesk Guide, as well as dynamic content in Zendesk Support. The connector is hosted directly in Smartling, which means that you can configure the connector settings and initiate and monitor the translation process directly in your Smartling dashboard. Since your content gets translated directly in Smartling, you can benefit from all the advantages of using a translation management platform, like a translation memory, automated quality checks, and flexible translation workflows. Once the translations are ready and completed, they get sent back directly to Zendesk without any copying and pasting. This automated way of requesting translations does not only save you time, but it also creates a reliable and seamless process that reduces the risk of human copying and pasting errors. Before setting up the connector in Smartling, it is important to first configure all required languages in Zendesk. All languages that you would like to translate from and translate into need to be added both in Zendesk Guide and in Zendesk Support. In Zendesk Guide, please navigate to the Settings by clicking on the gear icon in the menu on the left-hand side. Then select Language Settings. Here you can see which language is currently set as the default. This is the source language that you will translate from. Please add all target languages that you will translate your content into and enter a name for your localized help center. Once the language configuration is complete in Zendesk Guide, it is very important to configure the exact same languages also in Zendesk Support. Once you have navigated to Zendesk Support, please click on the gear icon on the left-hand side. Then follow the link to the Admin Center. In the Admin Center, please expand the Account menu. Under Appearance, select Localization to add additional languages. Here you can again see which language is currently set as the default, which is the source language that you will translate from. Please make sure that this matches the default language that is set up in Zendesk Guide. You can then add all of the additional languages that you would like to translate into. Please note that all languages need to be configured identically in both Zendesk Guide and Zendesk Support in order for the Smartling connector to function correctly. Once the language configuration has been completed in Zendesk Guide and Zendesk Support, the connector can now be set up and configured directly within your Smartling account. To get started, you need to create a dedicated project or translation environment for the Zendesk connector. To do so, please click on the Smartling logo in the top left-hand corner to reach the account dashboard. Please click Create New Project and select the project type Connector. In the next step, you can now select Zendesk as the platform that you would like to integrate with. Then choose the desired linguistic package and languages. Please ensure that the source language for your project corresponds to the default language used in Zendesk Guide and Support. To confirm the project setup, click Create. The new project has now been created and will serve as a dedicated environment for all of your translations with the Zendesk connector. Before proceeding, please make sure that all workflows, translation vendors, and linguistic assets are set up correctly and according to your preferences. Once your project has been created, you can see 3 tabs in Smartling that allow you to use and manage the Zendesk connector. From the Zendesk tab, you will be able to send content for translation. This will be the most important tab for your day-to-day use of the Smartling connector. We will take a closer look at this tab later on in this video. After you have sent some content for translation, you can check the Zendesk progress page from the gear icon to get some additional information about the status of your ongoing translations. For now, let's click into the Settings tab of your project and then navigate to the Zendesk Settings tab. This is where you can create and manage the connection between your Smartling project and your Zendesk instance. Once the project has been fully set up, the connection between Smartling and Zendesk can now be established. To connect the Smartling project to your Zendesk instance, you first need to authenticate as a Zendesk admin user. We strongly recommend creating a dedicated Zendesk admin account specifically for the configuration of the Smartling connector, which is not used for any other activities within your Zendesk instance. This ensures that any action taken on behalf of the Smartling connector can be easily identified, and it helps avoid having the connector suspended whenever an individual user account is removed. We recommend choosing a name for this dedicated Zendesk user account that clearly indicates its purpose for the Smartling connector. This makes it easier to pinpoint and track any actions taken by the connector at a later stage. To allow the connector to function correctly, the user account needs to be given admin access to your Zendesk instance. Before proceeding, please make sure that you are now logged into this dedicated Zendesk admin account. During the authentication process, the Zendesk account that you are currently logged into will be recognized automatically. From the Settings tab in your Smartling project, you can then navigate to the Zendesk Settings to access the connector configuration. Here you need to follow an authentication process to establish a secure connection between your Smartling project and your Zendesk instance. Please enter your Zendesk subdomain and click Connect. The Zendesk admin account which you are currently logged into is automatically recognized and used to establish a connection with Zendesk. A list of all available content from Zendesk has automatically been pulled into Smartling and is available in the Zendesk tab. Before requesting translations, please navigate back to the Zendesk settings to complete the language configuration. As part of the configuration process, you need to map the languages from your Zendesk account to the corresponding languages in Smartling. Sometimes Zendesk and Smartling might use two different names for the same language. So to allow the connector to function correctly, it is important to map the name of each language as it appears in Zendesk to the corresponding name as it appears in your Smartling project. First, you need to map the source language, which is the language you will be translating from. On the left side, please select the name of the default language as it appears in Zendesk Support and Zendesk Guide. For your reference, on the right side you can see the name of the source language as it appears in your Smartling project. Then follow the same process to map your target languages to the corresponding language names in Zendesk. This tells our connector which localized help center each of the languages should be sent back to when the translations are completed. In case any of your languages do not appear in the drop-down menu, please check your language configuration in Zendesk. In order for a language to appear here in Smartling, it needs to be configured identically in Zendesk Guide and in Zendesk Support. This process only needs to be done once for each language. So once you've completed the mapping and hit Save, you are all set. Whenever you add a new language to your translation project, please make sure to come back to this Zendesk settings page and complete the language mapping before sending any content for translation. On this same Zendesk settings page, you can find some additional settings that can be customized to your preferences. We will take a closer look at the automation of prior requests for translation and the delivery options at a later point in this video, when we will discuss how content updates and publishing options are handled in your translation project. Once the connector is configured, you can now begin sending content from Zendesk for translation. Simply follow your usual process to create the source content in Zendesk. Everything else then happens directly in Smartling. Provided that you have a Smartling user account with an account owner or project manager user role, you will be able to request and monitor translations from the Zendesk tab in your Smartling project. You can think of this tab as a direct view into your Zendesk platform. All available content assets from the connected Zendesk instance are listed here, whether they have already been translated or not. So this page provides a simple interface where you can navigate your Zendesk content to find the items that you would like to translate. If you're looking for some specific content, you can make use of a range of filtering options on the left side. For example, you can filter specifically for content that has not been translated yet. You can see the name of each content asset, a description or content hierarchy where applicable, the translation status, and the date when the content asset was last modified. Both articles which are published in Zendesk and draft articles are displayed in your Smartling project and can be sent for translation. We will take a look at your publishing options for translated draft articles later in this video. By clicking on the information icon, you can get an even more detailed breakdown and see the translation status for each of your target languages. If you would like to send a content asset for translation, you can request translations directly from this pop-up. Alternatively, if you would like to create a translation job for multiple items at the same time, simply navigate back to the list view. Select all content assets that you would like to send for translation and choose the option Request Translation from the Actions menu. You can now enter a name for your translation job, provide an optional description for further context, and select the target languages that the content should be translated into. In a second step, the job needs to be authorized to kick off the actual translation process. Simply select the desired translation workflow and authorize the job. This job is now in progress, and you can track the translation status in the Jobs tab. Alternatively, you can monitor the status for each individual asset in the Zendesk tab. Please note that it is very important to request translations only from the Zendesk tab. If you authorize any content for translation in a different way, the translations will not be sent back to Zendesk. If you opt for human translation, your linguists will be able to see a panel for visual context in their translation interface, which shows them a preview of the localized article. The only requirement for this visual context window to be available is for the source article to be published in Zendesk and visible to everyone. If you would like to make a preview available for draft articles or for other content types, you can make use of Smartling's Context Capture Chrome extension to capture visual context from any Zendesk page. As soon as the translations for any of your target languages are completed for a content asset, they automatically get sent back to Zendesk. You can now see them in Zendesk as a localized version of the original content type. Should there be any delay with the automated export or any updates to the existing translations, you also have the option to download translations manually back to Zendesk at any time. From the Zendesk tab, please click on the information icon of the asset that you would like to export the translations for. You can now choose to export the translation. This action sends the most up-to-date translations back to Zendesk immediately. This manual export option also comes in handy if any updates are made at a later point to a translation which had previously been completed and exported to Zendesk. When a completed translation is amended in Smartling, the new translation is not sent back to Zendesk automatically. Instead, the translated asset needs to be exported manually after the update has been made, in order to ensure that the corrected translation shows up in Zendesk. If you are working against a tight schedule and need translations to be sent back to Zendesk as soon as possible, even if they are still in progress in Smartling, please reach out to your Smartling representative to discuss our options for downloading all saved translations, even if they haven't reached full completion yet. In the Zendesk settings of your Smartling project, you can customize if the translations, which are sent back to Zendesk, should be publicly visible straight away. Under Delivery Options, you can choose if completed translations should always be published in Zendesk automatically, if they should always be sent back as a draft, or if they should be published in Zendesk only if the source content is also published. On this same Zendesk settings page, you can also customize how changes to your source content should be detected and handled by Smartling. Once you have requested a content asset to be translated, we can automatically monitor it for any updates. Every time you make an edit or an update to the source copy in Zendesk, Smartling can automatically detect the new content and place it into a translation job. This helps keep your translated content in sync with your source language. To determine how you would like Smartling to handle any updates to content that was previously requested for translation, please navigate to the options for automation of prior requests for translation. Here you can choose between 3 options. As the name suggests, the option Automatically Request Translation handles any content updates in a fully automated way. Whenever you make an edit in Zendesk to a page that has already been requested for translation in Smartling, we will automatically recognize that there is some new copy, pick up the new content, and put it into a translation job. These jobs that we create automatically for your updated content are called daily bucket jobs. Smartling checks for updated content to be put into a daily bucket job every 3 hours. Of course, only the new copy gets pulled into Smartling for translation. Any unaltered content that has remained the same does not need to be retranslated. Depending on your preferences, the daily bucket jobs for updated content can be authorized automatically and sent for translation straight away, or if you prefer to check the content first, the jobs can be left in the awaiting authorization status, so you can authorize them manually when you are ready to approve them. Please feel free to reach out to your Smartling Customer Success Manager, who can adjust this authorization setting to your preferences. Whether you choose to automatically authorize the daily bucket jobs or not, they are only meant to keep your translations in sync with your source text. New content assets that have never been requested for translation before are not included in the daily bucket jobs. Whenever you create a new page or article in Zendesk, it needs to be sent for translation manually from the Zendesk tab. Similarly, whenever you add a new language to your project, you need to manually request the translations of all required content from the Zendesk tab. Our daily bucket jobs do not include any new languages that were not part of the initial translation request. If you select the option Disabled, Smartling will not check for any updates to the content that you have previously requested for translation. Whenever you make changes to a page in Zendesk, the new content does not get pulled into Smartling automatically. So even if you update the source content, the localized pages will only show the initial translations. We would only recommend using this setting if you only ever want to translate the first version of each article. If you would like to translate some of your updated content, but also maintain full manual control, you can select the option Flag Changed Content. This setting allows Smartling to check for updated content, but we will not automatically create a translation job. Instead, every 3 hours, the Smartling connector will monitor the content that you had previously requested for translation. By clicking the checkbox Out of Sync in the Zendesk tab, you can see which content assets have been updated in Zendesk since you last requested them for translation. The new content is not put into a translation job automatically. Instead, you can now decide on a one-by-one basis which content assets you want to get an updated translation for. To request a translation for the updated source content, you can simply follow the usual process. Simply choose the option Request Translation from the Actions menu. You can now manually create and authorize a translation job for the updated copy. Of course, only the new or changed content is sent for translation. Any content that has remained the same does not need to be retranslated. If you would like to localize support macros, this can be achieved by using dynamic content as a placeholder. Simply create the canned response as dynamic content in Zendesk Support. The placeholder for this dynamic content can then be inserted in a support macro. Smartling Zendesk Connector supports the translation of dynamic content. Send the dynamic content for translation in the Zendesk tab of your Smartling project. The localized dynamic content will now be available to use in your support macros. Based on the language set up in your support agent's profile, the correct localized version of the dynamic content will automatically be displayed when using the macro. If you need more information about the Zendesk Connector and any of its settings, please visit our Help Center, where you can find detailed information about all available configuration and translation options. Thank you very much for watching and for your time today.